Most people aren't tired because they're doing too much. They're tired because they're doing too little of what actually matters. That quiet exhaustion you carry, the one that lingers even after a full night's sleep, it's not just physical, it's spiritual. It's what happens when your days are full but your soul feels empty. When you rush from task to task, yet deep down, you're not moving forward. You're just running in circles. The Buddha didn't teach us to run faster. He taught us to wake up, to see clearly, to stop being pulled by distractions and start living with awareness. And the truth is, your life doesn't change in the noise. It changes in the stillness, in those small sacred moments when you reclaim your attention and choose a different path. What we're talking about today isn't just a tip, it's a shift. A habit so simple yet so powerful that it has the potential to quietly reshape your entire life. So please don't skip a single part of this video. Every second is part of a deeper unfolding that connects to who you are and who you're becoming. And if you feel like this space is helping you find more clarity, more peace, more direction, then there's a simple free favor I'll ask of you. Hit the subscribe button. It helps this message reach others who are searching just like you, and it keeps this shared journey alive. Let's begin, together, with presence, with purpose, and with the wisdom of the Buddha to guide us forward. There's something deeply overlooked in the rush of modern life. Something so simple that most people dismiss it. And yet, it holds the key to nearly every change they're searching for. It's not about doing more or fixing everything at once. It's about being fully where you are, even for a few seconds. That's the quiet revolution of mindfulness. Not the kind sold in trendy packages, but the kind the Buddha spoke of over 2,500 years ago. The kind that invites you to return, not to your to-do list, not to your worries, but to this breath, this moment, this life that's unfolding right in front of you. When we speak about mindfulness in Buddhism, we're not just talking about meditation, we're talking about living with clarity. It's about watching your thoughts without getting caught in them, observing your emotions without letting them drag you around. It's waking up to the automatic behaviors that steal your time, your peace, your presence. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the path to liberation because it breaks the illusion of control and reconnects you with the truth of your own experience. And that truth is powerful. Because once you start seeing clearly, you stop running blindly. Most people are so used to noise, internal and external, that silence feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But in that silence, something sacred happens. You begin to hear yourself again. You start noticing the moment your mind wanders, the instant a negative pattern begins, the space between reaction and response. That space? That's where your power lives. That's where real transformation begins. Because the goal isn't to control everything, it's to see everything clearly and choose wisely. There's a strange kind of numbness that creeps in, not all at once, but slowly, quietly over time. You wake up one day and realize you've been living on autopilot. Not because you chose it, but because you got caught in the current. It starts with the little things, the constant checking of your phone, jumping from one obligation to another, letting notifications dictate your next move. And before you know it, you're not living your life, you're reacting to it. Your thoughts aren't yours anymore, your time isn't yours, and worst of all, your energy is scattered in so many directions that you can't even remember what truly matters to you. Buddha warned us of this kind of suffering. He didn't speak of it as punishment, but as a natural result of living without awareness. He taught that the mind, if left untrained, becomes a restless wanderer, always chasing, always distracted, never still. And in that restless state, we lose the connection to our inner self. We lose the ability to pause and ask, is this how I want to live? Instead, we keep scrolling, keep rushing, keep doing what we think we're supposed to do, until even joy starts to feel like a distant memory. What's worse is that we normalize it. We convince ourselves that this is just how life is, that exhaustion is success, that busyness is the purpose. But deep inside, a quieter voice starts to whisper, something's off. That voice isn't a weakness, it's wisdom. It's your awareness trying to break through the noise. Buddhism teaches that the path to liberation begins the moment we stop and notice, not fix, not fight, just notice how far we've drifted. That awareness alone is powerful, it's the turning point. Because once you see that you've been handing your time, your peace, your attention away, you also realize you have the power to take it back. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing that you've been living on autopilot. You go through the motions, checking your phone first thing in the morning, responding to messages, reacting to problems, without ever truly asking, is this how I want to live? It becomes normal to hand over your peace, your focus, even your mood to the outside world. And the scariest part? Most people don't even notice it happening. That's the quiet danger Buddha spoke of, not loud suffering but subtle ignorance, the slow forgetting of your own mind, the loss of presence. And yet within that realization lies something powerful, the ability to take it all back. When the Buddha spoke of liberation, he didn't mean escape. He meant awareness, waking up, seeing through the noise and choosing a different path. That starts with a simple but radical idea. You don't have to let the world dictate your rhythm. You can choose to reclaim your mornings, your attention, your energy, your life. You can decide moment by moment to stop reacting to everything around you and start responding from a place of clarity. That's what mindfulness really is, not just a meditation technique, but a way of living, a way of stepping out of the storm and standing in the stillness of your own presence. And this isn't about becoming perfect or never feeling overwhelmed again. It's about choosing to pause, to breathe, to see clearly, even in the middle of the chaos. It's about noticing when your attention is being pulled and gently bringing it back, like training a wild horse with patience and compassion. That's what the Buddha encouraged us to do with our minds, not to force them, but to guide them, to become masters of our own attention, rather than slaves to every impulse. Most people don't realize just how many of their thoughts and actions are on autopilot, from the way they respond to stress, to how they spend their mornings, even down to what they say to themselves when no one else is listening. So much of it isn't intentional. It's rehearsed, recycled, repeated from yesterday and the day before that. Not because they chose it, but because it became familiar. And in the absence of awareness, familiarity often wins. We don't see it happening, we just wake up one day feeling stuck, confused as to why our lives look the same, even though we say we want change. Buddha taught that the mind is everything, what you think you become. That teaching is as much a warning as it is a truth. Because if your thoughts are driven by fear, by old wounds, by stories you didn't even write, then your life becomes a reflection of those patterns, not because you're broken, not because you're unworthy, but because the mind, when left untrained, clings to what it knows, even if what it knows is pain. And in that clinging, we become trapped in habits we didn't consciously choose. This is where presence becomes the most powerful tool you have. It's not about achieving something grand or becoming someone new overnight. It's about becoming deeply aware of what's actually happening, within you and around you. When you bring mindfulness into your day, you start to catch the small things. The way your breath tightens when you're anxious, how quickly you reach for distraction when you feel discomfort, the tone you use with yourself when you make a mistake. These aren't flaws, they're signals, they're doorways to understanding. And with each one you notice, you reclaim a little more of your power. There's a moment in everyone's life when they get tired of waiting for clarity, for motivation. for some perfect condition to begin. And that's when something shifts. You stop hoping the world will change and start realizing that real change starts from the inside. One of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism is that we are the architects of our own minds. The Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought." That means you don't need to chase more answers or collect more advice. You just need to begin, here and now, with one conscious decision, to take responsibility for where your energy goes. This is where the real transformation begins, not in some distant future, not when everything calms down, but at this moment when you decide to stop outsourcing your power. The habit we're talking about here isn't dramatic, it won't look impressive on social media, but it's everything. It's the habit of coming back to your breath, your thoughts, your intention, again and again. Mindfulness isn't just a meditation technique, it's a way of living where you stop reacting blindly and start responding wisely. It's where your power lives. Most people look for discipline in force, they think pushing harder will get them further. But in Buddhist practice, discipline is built through gentle repetition, through remembering what matters and returning to it, no matter how many times you drift. This simple act of returning, of noticing when your mind has wandered and bringing it back, is the foundation of all self-mastery. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You stop living on autopilot. You start creating from intention. Most people are constantly reacting to life, moving from one thing to another without ever stopping to ask, "Why am I doing this?" The day starts, and before you've even had a quiet moment to breathe, the noise floods in. Notifications, obligations, other people's priorities. And just like that, your inner world is no longer your own. But the Buddha taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. That's not just a beautiful phrase, it's a reminder that your life is shaped by your attention. Where your mind rests, your life follows. And if your awareness is scattered, pulled in every direction, then so is your path. But here's what most people miss. Your attention is not a passive thing. It's a force, a tool, a sacred energy. And when you begin to direct it on purpose, everything changes. You start to notice how your energy is spent. You recognize when your mind is spiraling into thoughts that drain you. You become more aware of the emotions rising in you before they take control. That awareness doesn't just help you feel better. It gives you power, real spiritual power, the power to choose your response instead of living on autopilot. In Buddhism, this is the essence of mindfulness. It's not just about meditating on a cushion. It's about living with your eyes open, fully present, fully awake. The Dhammapada says, "Awareness is the path to the deathless. Unawareness is the path to death." That's how serious it is. When we're unaware, we're not truly living, we're just existing. But the moment you start paying attention to your thoughts, your speech, your choices, you begin to live with clarity. You stop being tossed around by moods and start anchoring yourself in wisdom. We often think excellence belongs to the gifted, the disciplined, the naturally motivated. We believe it's a rare state, achieved only through extraordinary effort or bursts of inspiration. But that's not the full story. What if I told you that true excellence doesn't require you to do more? It requires you to do less, but with presence and consistency. That's where real mastery begins, not in some grand performance, but in the simple, quiet actions you repeat every day. The Buddha once said, "Drop by drop is the water pot filled." It's not the flood that transforms you, it's the daily drip, the steady, conscious return to what matters. You see, we often overestimate what can be done in a single day and underestimate what's possible with sustained, mindful effort. We want the results, the clarity, the peace, but we forget they come from a habit of alignment, not occasional intensity. Buddhism teaches us that the path is not about burning ourselves out with desire for perfection, but walking steadily in awareness. It's not the once-in-a-while meditation or that rare moment of insight that brings transformation. It's what you repeat, the thoughts you feed, the way you show up even when it's boring, even when no one is watching, even when you don't feel like it. Aristotle echoed this truth when he said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And Buddha taught that what we think, we become. If you repeatedly think with clarity, act with intention, and return to the present moment, then excellence isn't something you chase, it's something you live. Not for the applause, not for validation, but because it aligns with who you are. There's a quiet turning point in every person's life, a moment where you stop living as a reaction to everything around you and start living as a creator of what's within you. For most of us, life feels like a constant series of responses. An email comes in, we respond. Someone disappoints us, we react. The day brings a challenge, we brace for it. But the Buddha taught that freedom is found not in controlling the world, but in mastering our response to it. And that mastery doesn't begin with force, it begins with awareness. When you start your day grounded in mindfulness, you're no longer thrown around by external events. You develop an inner stillness that gives you room to choose your response. That's not just peace, it's power. This is where a profound shift begins to take root. You stop chasing the next best moment, the next perfect condition, and instead begin to work steadily with what's already here. You no longer wait for inspiration to strike. You cultivate it through deliberate action. You begin to trust the process, not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. The Buddha often emphasized right effort, not frantic effort, not forced effort, but effort that comes from a place of clarity and compassion. It's the difference between sprinting in panic and walking with intention. When you embrace this mindset, you realize that even the smallest task becomes sacred. Even folding laundry, answering a message, or taking a breath can be an act of mindfulness. And what's truly beautiful is how quickly this change begins to shape your life. You feel more present, you make fewer mistakes, you're less reactive when things don't go your way, because you're no longer operating from anxiety, you're operating from alignment. You become someone who builds, not just a schedule or a plan, but a life that reflects your values, a life that honors your inner peace, a life that isn't just about surviving the day, but about creating something meaningful from it. Buddha's path isn't about perfection, it's about presence, about showing up fully, doing what you can with where you are, and allowing that quiet consistency to transform you. And when you do that, not just once but every day, your life becomes a reflection of your practice. We live in a world that worships complexity. Everyone's chasing the next strategy, the latest system, the most optimized routine. We fill our minds and our schedules with so much noise, thinking that more must be the answer. But what if it's not? What if the real secret to peace, clarity, and transformation isn't about doing more, but doing less, with greater awareness? The Buddha didn't give us complicated systems. He offered simple truths. And yet those simple truths hold the kind of power that can dissolve a lifetime of confusion. That's the beauty of the path. It's not crowded, not because it's hidden, but because it's quiet. Buddhism teaches that liberation doesn't come from acquiring more, but from letting go of attachment, of expectation, of the belief that your life has to be some elaborate performance in order to have value. The greatest peace often comes not when we finally arrive somewhere, but when we strip everything down to what's essential. That's why mindfulness is such a powerful habit, not because it adds something to your life, but because it removes the clutter so you can see what was already there. Your breath, this moment, your ability to choose. The mind loves to chase after what's flashy. But transformation happens in the ordinary, in the space between moments, in the quiet decision to return to yourself again and again. You might think that can't possibly be enough, that something so basic couldn't lead to something so profound. But the Buddha taught that even a single drop of water, falling consistently, can fill a great vessel. In the same way, even small moments of awareness repeated with intention can completely shift the direction of your life. There's a reason why some people keep showing up day after day, even when life feels heavy, while others wait for the perfect mood, the right inspiration, or just a better time. The difference isn't talent, it isn't luck. It's a quiet inner decision to stop letting feelings dictate action. Because feelings are unreliable guests, they come and go without warning. One moment they tell you you're ready. Next, they convince you to quit. If you let your emotions steer the wheel, you'll always be starting and stopping, never moving far enough to see change. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that true freedom begins when we stop being slaves to our impulses and start observing them instead. Buddhism teaches us the nature of impermanency, anicca. Everything is constantly shifting, including how we feel. And when you realize that your mood is just a passing cloud, you no longer build your plans around the weather. You learn to sit with discomfort, not run from it. You show up not because it feels good, but because it's the right thing to do. That's real strength. And it's something we all have the ability to cultivate. You don't have to feel fearless to act with courage. You don't need motivation to take a step forward. You just need to remember your direction, your dharma, your deeper path, and let that guide you instead. The mind, when trained, becomes like still water, clear, focused, and steady. But without mindfulness, it gets tossed around by every passing wave. One moment of doubt, one lazy morning, one bad conversation, and suddenly your entire day derails. But when direction becomes stronger than emotion, you start showing up even when it's inconvenient, even when your mind is noisy, even when no one sees. That's where transformation begins. Not in perfect conditions, but in imperfect ones met with commitment. Some days you wake up and everything just feels off. You don't want to move, you don't feel inspired. The motivation that felt so strong yesterday is suddenly gone, like it was never there. And in that moment, it's so easy to surrender, to let your emotions run the show, to scroll instead of sit, to react instead of respond. But here's something Buddha taught that's changed my life. Your emotions are real, but they're not always true. They're passing clouds, not permanent skies. If we allow them to dictate the course of our day, we'll always be at the mercy of the moment. But if we learn to center ourselves in something deeper, something rooted, we begin to live from direction, not mood. Buddhism invites us to walk the middle way, a path of clarity, not chaos. It doesn't ignore emotion, but it doesn't worship it either. The Dhammapada reminds us that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. But thoughts come and go. So what if, instead of chasing a fleeting feeling, you anchored yourself in steady intention? You decide what matters to you. You set the tone. And even when you don't feel like it, you take a small step. That's discipline, not punishment, not force, just quiet, loving alignment with your higher self. Think about it. How many important things have you put off because it didn't feel like the right time? How many dreams have been delayed because the spark wasn't there? The truth is, emotion can be beautiful fuel when it flows, but when it doesn't, your direction becomes your compass. Buddha didn't ask us to wait for perfect conditions. He asked us to be present, to act with mindfulness. When your actions are shaped by clarity and not temporary emotion, you start building something that lasts. Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid discomfort. We build routines around comfort, chase jobs that feel safe, and stay in relationships that are familiar, even if they drain us, just to keep discomfort at bay. But what if discomfort wasn't something to fear? What if it was a guide? In Buddhism, discomfort is not an enemy, it's a mirror. It reflects back to us the areas of our life that need attention, healing, and growth. Buddha never promised a life without suffering. In fact, he taught that suffering is woven into the fabric of existence. But he also taught that through awareness, we can transform our relationship to it. We can turn discomfort into our greatest teacher. And you've probably noticed that the things that cause the most growth are rarely easy. The hardest conversations lead to the deepest clarity. The toughest choices often set you free. The moments when your chest tightens, when your ego flares, when your mind wants to run, those are the gateways to transformation. When you begin to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, you start to see it for what it really is: resistance to change. And that resistance isn't here to destroy you, it's here to show you where the work begins. Buddha often reminded his followers that liberation comes not from comfort, but from understanding. And understanding only deepens when we stay present with what's hard. Mindfulness teaches us to observe without judgment. So when discomfort arises, instead of labeling it as bad or wrong, you watch it. You breathe with it. You ask it what it's trying to show you. You become curious. And with that curiosity, fear loses its grip. You're no longer controlled by the emotion, you're learning from it. You're becoming someone who doesn't run from difficulty, but grows through it. And that shift is everything. Think about how often we say, "I just need more time." It's one of the most common sentences in modern life. We whisper it to ourselves when we're overwhelmed, when we miss a goal, when we feel like we're falling behind. But here's the truth: time isn't the issue. We all wake up with the same 24 hours. The difference isn't in the hours themselves, it's in how we show up for them. The Buddha taught that our suffering comes not from the conditions of our life, but from our relationship to them. And it's the same with time. It's not how much you have, but how consciously you use it. You see, when your mind is scattered, jumping from thought to thought, task to task, it doesn't matter how many hours you have. You'll always feel like they're slipping through your fingers. And the more you try to chase time, the more it runs from you. But when you begin to practice mindfulness, as taught in Buddhism, something beautiful happens. You start to slow time down by being fully present in each moment. You move with clarity, not confusion. You begin to see which actions are rooted in your purpose and which ones are just noise dressed up as urgency. The Buddha often spoke about right effort, one of the key steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. It doesn't mean working harder. It means aligning your energy with what actually matters. Most of us don't need more hours. We need to stop giving our attention to things that don't align with our values. Mindless scrolling, overthinking, saying yes to every request, staying busy just to feel useful. These are all ways we lose time without even noticing. And once that time is gone, it doesn't return. That's why in Buddhism, awareness is everything. When you bring awareness into your day, you take back the time you once gave away. There's a certain kind of peace that only exists before the world wakes up, before the notifications start buzzing, before the noise of the day creeps in, before your responsibilities start tugging at your attention. It's a quiet window, often overlooked, where your mind is soft, your thoughts are still unformed, and your energy hasn't yet been scattered. Most people don't realize how sacred that space is. They wake up and immediately give it away, to social media, to emails, to someone else's urgency. And in that small act, they surrender their most powerful moment of the day, the beginning. The Buddha often spoke about right intention, the idea that the direction of your thoughts determines the direction of your life. And what sets that direction more than the first thoughts of your day? Buddhism teaches that how you greet the morning is how you greet your life. If you wake up with restlessness, with distraction, with resistance, you carry that energy into everything you touch. But if you rise with intention, with mindfulness, even with a few breaths of stillness, you anchor yourself in clarity before the winds of the world start blowing. That's not just a habit, that's a discipline, a sacred practice. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a perfect morning routine, a fancy journal, or a 5 a.m. alarm clock. You just need to pause, to sit, to breathe, to ask yourself, not what needs to get done, but who do I want to be as I move through this day? When you start the day in awareness, you begin to notice the difference between movement and meaning. You stop rushing to catch up and start showing up fully. That small act of reclaiming your morning becomes an act of reclaiming yourself. You are no longer pulled by urgency, you are led by purpose. You start to trust your own pace, your own rhythm, and gradually, without needing to force it, you begin to move with greater presence and less pressure. That is the essence of Buddhist wisdom, not to run from the world, but to move through it with clarity. And once you give yourself that first moment, even just a few quiet breaths to return to yourself, you don't lose the day, you lead it. And in doing so, you begin to lead your life. Most people wait for the perfect moment to change. They wait for a clear sign, a wave of motivation, or a burst of energy that will finally push them to act. But here's something Buddhism teaches us that completely changes that idea. Waiting is an illusion. The right moment doesn't arrive, it's created. The Buddha spoke often about the present moment being the only true ground we have. Not the past, not the future. Right now, that's where your life is being built. So the question isn't when will things change? The question is, are you willing to start now, even before it feels perfect? Momentum isn't something that appears on its own. It's not handed to you. It's not a gift from the universe. It's something you generate through action, through presence, through small decisions made with full attention. In Buddhist practice, we call this right effort, one of the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path. It means putting in effort not to force results, but to move with mindfulness and consistency. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters with awareness. That's how you build momentum. One breath, one choice, one mindful step at a time. Think about how different your day feels when you start it with purpose. When you wake up and move, not because your alarm yelled at you, but because your intention pulled you. That quiet decision, getting out of bed with presence, not panic, is where momentum is born. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to conquer the world by noon. You just need to begin. When you do that repeatedly, momentum becomes part of you. It becomes your energy, your rhythm, your strength, and suddenly, it's not hard to show up anymore. It's natural. It's who you are. You know what most of us overlook? The things that seem too small to matter. We chase big changes, grand breakthroughs, and complicated systems because we've been taught that transformation has to be loud, to be real. But the Buddha taught the opposite. He taught that liberation begins not with a roar, but with a breath. A single breath, fully aware, fully present, can be the doorway to freedom. The things that truly shift your life often arrive without drama. No applause, no fanfare, just a quiet return to what's already here. That's why we miss it. It feels too ordinary to hold any real power. But that's exactly what makes it so effective. The habit we're exploring here, mindfulness, presence, the ability to come back to this moment, isn't flashy. It doesn't require special equipment or years of training. It's available to you right now, wherever you are. And yet, because it's so simple, most people dismiss it. They keep searching for something more complex, more exciting. But Buddhism reminds us, it's not complexity that frees you, it's clarity. When you begin to slow down, when you actually sit with your thoughts instead of running from them, you start to see how much noise you've been living in. The Buddha didn't say, complicate your way to peace. He said, be still and know. Simplicity isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And there's something else. When you embrace simplicity, your resistance fades. You stop waiting for the right mood or the perfect moment. You begin to act, not with force, but with quiet consistency. That's where the magic happens, not in trying harder, but in returning again and again to what matters. That's how the mind is trained, not by sudden enlightenment, but by the patient repetition of awareness. Like water shaping rock, mindfulness shapes your life through gentle, constant presence. Most people spend their lives waiting for the right mood, the right moment, the right motivation. They tell themselves, I'll start tomorrow, or maybe next week will be better. And quietly, time slips away. But what if the shift you're hoping for isn't waiting for a perfect moment? What if it's waiting for you? Buddha taught that we're not bound by fate, we're shaped by our choices. All that we are, he said, is the result of what we have thought. And in that teaching is a quiet, powerful truth. You are not a victim of your life's conditions. You are the creator of your path, moment by moment. We often think transformation has to be loud, something dramatic, something that turns everything upside down. But Buddhism reminds us that real change begins quietly. It begins in awareness. And with awareness comes choice. At any moment, you can decide to step off the path of reactivity and onto the path of intention. That doesn't require a complete overhaul of your life. It requires a single decision. To take ownership of your thoughts, to protect your attention, to stop handing your time and energy to things that leave you feeling scattered and empty. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. Buddha never said we need to be flawless to live mindfully, only that we must be willing to return, again and again, to what matters. When you realize that, you also realize something else. You are never more than one decision away from a new life. One moment of clarity can interrupt years of autopilot. One breath, taken with full presence, can remind you of your power. You don't have to wait for a new life to arrive. You just have to step into it. The smallest shift in awareness, the quietest decision made with clarity, can ripple through everything you are and everything you're becoming. Remember, the Buddha didn't offer escape, he offered awakening. And that awakening begins the moment you choose to live deliberately. Thank you for being a part of Buddhist journey. If this message spoke to something deep within you, there's more waiting just for you. Watch one of the suggested videos on the screen and continue walking this path with intention.